Welcome to the Reboot Chronicles, connecting you to the world's top leaders and CEOs rebooting their organizations and themselves with revealing stories to help you prosper in unprecedented times. I'm your host, Dean DeBias, and as a serial CEO who's led dozens of companies that created thousands of jobs and billions in revenue, my passion is uncovering powerful lessons that can inspire you to reboot your organization, your career, and your life. Listen and subscribe wherever you get podcasts or at rebootchronicles.com. We've had a few disruptive fintech companies on the Reboot Chronicles, usually talking about how they're kind of reshaping financial services, including CEOs of Brex, Affirm, Remitly, and others. And one thread in all of those is trust. So I want to get into that today. And I just published a Forbes article about it. If you want to dig into it a little bit. But my guest today is Rodrigo Teijeiro, who is running a pretty cool company that he's been on a mission to democratize financial services as the CEO of one of Brazil's fastest growing company, RecargaPay, which provides payments, platforms, mobile wallets, digital financial services to merchants and people, including some unbanked consumers, which is a growing sector, as many of you know. After raising over $150 million over the years, this 600-person remote-only company has been on a tear, serving about 10 million people in Brazil with transaction payment volume approaching, I think, about $4 billion. Rodrigo, it's good to see you.
Hey, Dean, a pleasure. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Yeah, it's always good to have a entrepreneur that has stuck it out for almost 20 years. You've been doing this, so it's this is not like a sorry to lump you into the fintech thing. We didn't even use that word back then, but the category is still going in interesting directions. And, you're in what I think is still the fifth largest country by volume anyway, and one of the most populated. Brazil has about 220 million people, which is huge market. Yeah. And is that why you chose to operate there?
Look, I'm originally from Argentina, and we've had all our crises down there, and Brazil as well. But the fact that it was a very large, complex market, if you wanted to make it in Latin America, you had to become the king of Brazil. So one of the reasons for attacking Brazil was that, and because it's one of the most sophisticated financial industries in the world for Brazil. So it was very challenging, and it was fun to get in there.
I bet. So how are you guys kind of upending financial services? I'll say down there, since we're both here in Florida today.
Yeah. So look, what we're trying to accomplish here is pretty simple. We want to make a one-stop shop for all your payments and financial needs for consumers and for merchants. And basically, we've had to disrupt a whole bunch of things to really make this possible. If you compare a traditional bank to us, we have no physical branches. It's all smartphone. We have no physical offices. It's all remote. We have no mainframes. It's all cloud, no legacy software. It's all open source software. We have no brand campaigns. It's all organic, influencers, SEO, word of mouth. And we've taken advantage of a whole bunch of things that the Central Bank of Brazil has permitted. Smaller companies such as ours, with deregulation, with new payment systems such as Pix, which is an incredible technology that has allowed a widespread of usage, surpassing even cash, surpassing credit cards, and also an explosion of open finance. So a whole array of things has allowed us to be where we are today.
Yeah, it's a perfect storm. Many companies like Uber never would have made it if the smartphones hadn't got there just in time. But what is open? You mentioned some buzzwords there. People might want to know open banking. But Pix, what's Pix?
So Pix is some if you're in the US and FedNow, but it's basically a system where you can pay things via QR code. And let's say you go to a restaurant and you pay with your credit card, use the POS of the credit card. In this case, if you have a QR code and an app that reads that QR code, you could make that transaction seamlessly. And what it is, it's that there's no cost associated. It's real time, and it's interoperable. So it's something that's pretty amazing because it has just grown like crazy in Brazil, and every large and small merchant accepts it And now penetration of consumers is over 95%. So it has really become ubiquitous, and it has just lowered the cost of transacting, and it has reduced the amount of cash in the economy. And it has become a rail that is competing head to head with credit card, which now just recently surpassed significantly the transactions of credit cards in Brazil.
Yeah, and there's probably a massive fee advantage there for the consumer, which is great. And
more for the merchant, if you
yeah,
think about it.
that's
More
what I
for
meant.
the
Yeah, yeah.
merchant.
Right.
Yeah, more for the merchant, because the merchant wants to accept wants to receive those payments via Pix instead of a credit card, because with Pix there's no cost, and with a credit card there might be 3, 4, 5%. So the incentives are very clear.
Yeah, some of the fintechs up here, they're actually riding on the rails of other credit card companies, kind of, doing private branded ones and things. Whereas I think Pix is much more innovative. It's like, hey, I mean, how some merchants can still afford like American Express, the rates are still very, very different from your typical like a Visa MasterCard situation. And what about the unbanked down there? Is that a big market? 230 million out down there?
Yeah, well, you have 230 million people in Brazil alone. But really, this PIC system has allowed people to get bankerized. Anybody that has a smartphone, which has become also ubiquitous because cheap Android phones built in China cost less than $100 nowadays.
Right.
So it's the things that anybody can have nowadays, and the cost of uploading cash into your wallet and paying with that is very low. So unbanked has dropped just tremendously. So thanks to Pix, and we allow for unbanked, underserved, and banked people into RecargaPay. But ultimately, it's just it's raising all boats, right? So in a sense, everybody has been digitalized now.
Yeah, and the reduction in people carrying cash is accelerating now more than ever.
Yeah. Well, it used to be cash was king, but now it really has transformed in a very digital economy.
Yeah. What's it like running a company here in Miami? I know you guys everyone's remote, which is at scale at over 600. That's tough enough to run, but you on a plane a lot? You going back and forth? What do you do?
Well, I used to. I moved here in Miami like 8 years and a half ago. The company is 600 people, 500 are in Brazil, half of them in Sao Paulo, the other half in the rest of Brazil. We have about 80 people in Argentina, where I'm originally from, and then we have 20 people scattered all across. I live here in Miami, and what's interesting is that actually when I started this business, this cap table, it was 2003 actually.
Wow.
And I started when I was in Los Angeles, and it was a calling card business that I started, was selling calling cards online. And what was interesting about that was that my actual programmers were based in Ukraine. The customer support was in Argentina, and my customers were everywhere. And this is 2003. So I started the business being remote. And over the years, the technology was just improving to make it possible, right? The internet just became ubiquitous, smartphones, video, cameras, mics, SaaS products, and the sort. And actually in 2012, something that was very interesting, when I was living in Argentina, in summer, we were having electricity cuts. And imagine if you have an office with 100 people and you have electricity cut, nobody can work. So at that time, I made the decision that the single point of failure in the company was actually the office. And I made it so everybody could work outside of the office, in a cafe, in their house. So basically what we did is we bought everybody first laptops, and then smartphones. The servers that we had in the office, we put it in the cloud. So like by 2012, we could operate completely remote. And when COVID came, the company was completely built out. And from one day to another, we pushed everybody to work from their homes. and we never came back.
Yeah.
Basically,
People probably came to you for advice about how to manage it.
yeah,
It's an interesting story. One of the reasons I wanted to have you talk to our folks is most companies start somewhere, like you would have started in LA, and then expand globally. That's what most of the CEO profiles that have been on,
yeah,
from multinationals to startups. And you
yeah,
did just the opposite. You're like, hey, we're trying this
yeah,
out in 10 countries. How
yeah,
did you choose to let's just triple down in Brazil?
yeah. So this was the year 2015, and we
Yeah.
were running this RecargaPay in over 10 countries. And what I realized, actually, I had a conversation with a friend that is an entrepreneur in the US, and we were just sharing war stories as entrepreneurs. And he'd shared that he was paying his salaries for his employees from one bank account in one product, right? And then suddenly I thought, wait, I have 25 bank accounts. I have 10 different accountants, lawyers. I have money spread all over the place. And I said, wow, I'm complicating myself way too much on what I'm building. At the same time, every country was very different in regulation, in the payment stack, in KYC, and in a whole bunch of
Yeah.
things. And also, the size and complexity was very different. And we realized that Brazil was the largest, the most complex. We had a lot of growth going on there. So we decided, you know what, we're going to simplify. Instead of having English, Spanish, Portuguese, we'll just do Portuguese. And 10 countries will have one. And we doubled down completely on Brazil. Of course, it wasn't very sexy for my board because they wanted like these flags like in multiple countries and the sort, but it worked out incredibly well because it made us focus
Right.
our resources, our time, and our prioritization in one place, and it's worked incredibly well.
It's a tough board struggle. I've been there. They just want to
Mm-hmm.
be large and in charge and dominate the world and focus. Whatever
Yeah.
niche is what they call it. They don't love
Uh-huh.
it when the CEO's like narrow-minded. I'm
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
narrow-minded. I'm like
Yeah.
going to own this country. Your
Yeah.
valuation's probably gone through the roof because of that.
Yeah.
You mentioned. So, what's your average consumer like? Do you have one?
Yeah. Like the most valuable and the largest is anywhere between 25 to 40 years of age. That's like and this is a person that middle income, and they use us to basically deposit money. They get the best interest rate in Brazil. We launched this year actually a credit card that has the largest cashback in Brazil. They can make all their payments via Pix through RecargaPay, send it to friends, pay in merchants, and they can top up their phones. They could top up their public transportation, buy gift cards, and that's kind of the average. We have a lot of students also that use public transportation, which is very unique. We have like 75 cities that we've connected in Brazil alone, which just allows them to, from the ease of their couch, to top up their card so they can go on the bus or the subway or the train. It's very convenient.
Smart catching them getting out of school too. Are you guys doing peer to peer yet, like a Venmo and Zelle
Yeah.
here?
Yeah, so RecargaPay is like PayPal meets Square meets Venmo meets 7-Eleven. I mean, if you would have to like grasp it in a sense, right?
Yeah,
It's more complex than your typical company in the U.S., but it's less complex than a WeChat that you would find in China, right?
right. And what are you finding? You mentioned you don't do a lot of marketing. You've probably
Mm-hmm.
done a lot of partnerships. Have you got some celeb endorsements and stuff? Where'd the groundswell come from?
So, so you know how this is, right? Ultimately, there's price elasticity on these things,
Yeah,
and basically through disrupting the way we do business and passing all those savings to the consumers, we've seen that becoming not only convenient, easy to use, but also the best value proposition has played out incredibly well. So if you want to do a Pix, you want a credit card, everything that you do under Recarga Pay is easier, faster, and cheaper. So and that just works. And in today with social media, in Twitter and TikTok and Instagram and you name it, people are just sharing it, and it makes it the word of mouth is fantastic, and we've done partnerships of all sorts with Burger King, with McDonald's, and you can pay for specific menus with a discount once you use RecargaPay. We haven't had like these massive famous endorsements of any. We haven't searched for them, but we have done partnerships with different kinds of brands to pay for things.
Yeah, and it's probably easier when you're focused on one country. Like
Yeah.
used to go to Mexico a lot, and there's just so many vendors there, and you just
Mm-hmm.
lock them up, whether it's QR code or something else. What about competition? What's going on there? You got the big dog banks, you got other startups. What's happening?
Yeah. So as I was saying before, the competition is super interesting in Brazil because you have the old legacy banks, which have, let's say, Itaú or Banco de Brasil, they have 100,000 employees. You have the new crowd, the neobanks, such as a Nubank or a Banco Inter. And then you have companies such as RecargaPay that offer the same thing with 600 people. So for us, conceptually, it's about offering the best product at the best value proposition. So ultimately, what's going on here is that there's being a technological disruption in these three phases. And what we're being able to offer is something very unique and very hard to replicate.
So we're not putting you in the neobank category?
So the problem that you have today with fintech and payments is that
Yeah.
everybody kind of comes from different places, but everybody's trying to go to the same, which is
Yeah.
basically hold on to the consumer and offer him as much services as possible. So if you think about it, we started our first use case was allowing people to pay their mobile top-ups. And from mobile top-ups, we went to banking, which at that moment was very hard to see how we could do that jump. But the concept was offer very specific use cases that are useful for people that are not being resolved by the market. So we saw a market in Latin America with 600 million people. Vast majority of people were using cell phones, but 80% of those cell phone users were prepaid. And those prepaid users would have to go physically and do lines and pay in cash for a digital service that could be paid in cash, that could be paid digitally. So we allowed that first use case, and then we started allowing people to pay for other things. And that's how we generated the initial traction. And then we started cross-selling and upselling different payments and financial services.
I mentioned trust in the opening and in the Forbes article. I didn't mention this, but it just occurs to me that most of the early banks, especially in North America, they always had the name trust in them. Like I'm an old Chicago guy, Northern Trust, Savings and Trust, Sun Trust, trust, because people didn't trust. I'm not going to put my money in that building. How did you build your brand to be trustworthy? Was there headwinds there?
I think ultimately it's about offering a service of quality and customer service that people know that if they have any problem, they can resort to somebody. But ultimately, I'm a big believer in the quality of the product. We have a super high NPS, and with consistency, you can build loyalty. Because we started in 2010 these mobile top-ups, and this is next year, 2025. It's something that 15 years in the making. We have customers that have been with us for 10 years and they've seen this evolution. And we've been able to build that trust over time. And now every time that we launch new services, we see that there's a higher trust because they test these things out much faster than before. Before, when we were only mobile top-ups, when we started allowing people to pay their bills and pay them in installments, it took a while. Honestly, it took many quarters to really get that through. But now, every time we launch something, we feel that there's this trust that now people deposit a significant amount of their savings into RecargaPay, for example, and that you only build with time and consistency and just having a good product.
And where's the money go? Do you have a banking partner, or is it you're set up to do all that yourself now?
So what's fascinating is that the Central Bank of Brazil has made some licenses that allow companies such as ours to be able to offer this. So we don't have any banking partnership. We're actually an institución de pagamento, and we have another institution called SSFI that also allows us to accept deposits and give interest rate. And I mean, we can practically do anything that a bank does, but with these licenses.
Yeah, that is a huge differentiator.
Yeah.
The other thing I think you do well, I talk about a lot, is just the frictionlessness of this is how it probably took off so quick. There's so much friction in traditional brands, from like take Starbucks for instance. It's like talk about not being focused. Too many choices, and at least in this country, long lines, all that stuff. They're like, hey, we have an app. I'm like, yeah, but there's friction at the counter now because unfortunately I can't drink it virtually from your phone. But it seems like you cracked that and made it so. I mean, there's just so many lessons here. Encourage people to go look at your app. That it's as we called it up here, a no-brainer to start using it. And did you run into some trouble there with, because you're in a highly regulated industry? Everything from you got to hit the confirm screen and all this, not just friction. There's always friction in checking out of things.
Yeah. So it's cool that you mentioned that, because once you understand the product, we do not only allow people to do PIX payments, right?
Yep.
So with a QR code, with the money that you have in the balance, but you can actually upload any credit card from any bank into RecargaPay and then pay that PIX funded with a credit card. Now you can add that Itaú card, the Bradesco, and a whole bunch of other banks in Brazil. And that's something that's very convenient because you consolidate everything in one single place. So we have a lot of data of what people are spending. So it's not just one bank. People have the possibility of adding all their cards into one single place. And that allows for a lot of convenience and being concentrated, all your payments in one single place.
So as a platform, you're evolving. You have multiple business models. It's not just one trick pony, which is smart.
Well, it used to be one trick pony, and then we evolved it, right? And now it's like the top ups is less than 1% of our total payment volume, and less than 1% of our revenue. So you can imagine how it has evolved.
Wow. Yeah. It was a compliment. Speaking of evolving, where do you see the company going? What's next if you look out over second half of the decade here?
Look, I think the trend that is going on, not only in Brazil, but it's starting to happen across the world, is open finance. So consumers being the owners of their own data and being able to share it with whoever they please. And that makes for an expansion of a competition, which ultimately gives consumers better products and better pricing. So what's going on in Brazil right now is that to make better underwriting models, to better fraud models, and the sort, it's very convenient to allow a consumer that signs up into RecargaPay to allow them to share you the data they have from their other banks that they've been partners for 10 years. So once that happens, you basically have their whole financial history, and allows you to give them even better products much faster. So there is going to be a huge disruption going forward on the possibilities of the offerings that we can do with consumers, and has to do with investments of any sorts, and just the continuation of this thesis that the Central Bank of Brazil has with PIX.
Yeah, I mean, Brazil actually might jump ahead of other developed countries that are slow. So, for instance, Web3 is not very popular with the oligopoly of internet consumer financial services companies.
Yeah,
they don't love what you just said, because that's kind of Web3 kind of stuff. I own my own data. Thank you very much, but I don't need you anymore.
Yeah. So, for Brazil, it's very hard. I can't believe that this happened in Brazil, particularly because the oligopoly was very strong. So
very strong.
If it can happen in Brazil, I'm pretty sure it can happen anywhere in the world.
I bet you've got some interesting stories. I just dumbed down the word. Sorry. Maybe provocative. Having been doing this for 10, 15, 20 years. What's been your biggest struggle along the way?
Biggest struggle? I mean, I've had many. I've many moments of hard to raise capital, mistakes with people, moments of almost being bankrupt. Actually, being bankrupt, but somehow figuring out not how to get out of it. And so, I would say that probably the worst moment was 2009. And why is that? So let's go back a little bit to 2008. 2008,
Oh, that was
at that
brutal.
moment, 2008, early 2008, everything was going great. We had built this social network called Sonico.com. It was growing at millions of users every month. And we had raised capital. We had raised $6 million in capital early 2008. 3 months later, we get an offer from three very reputable companies, one of them being Google, to buy the company for $150 million. And I was the owner of 80% of the company at that moment.
Yep.
And so what happens? Why did I not sell? Well, I wanted to sell. The issue was that a couple of months into the negotiation, the Nasdaq starts to collapse after Bear Stearns and the sort, and then all the investors are let's wait and see, right? Let's wait and see what happens. Ultimately, we know the story. The market collapsed, so I wasn't able to sell the company. And early 2009, Facebook raises a massive $400 million round. And I said, okay, this is game over. I mean, these guys are going to take over the world with social networking. So my local social network that reached 55 million users, I didn't really foresee a future in like 2-3 years out. So early 2009, I have to start cutting people. So I fired like 30% of the people in the company to extend a little bit the runway. But ultimately, it was a very hard moment in my life. I thought I had, I missed out on the sale. Then I had to close a big chunk of the business with very hard competitive headwinds. And also, I had my child that was 2-3 years of age. I was married. I'm still married. And but it was a very hard moment, because it was a lesson also in leadership. As an introvert myself, I had an idea of how a CEO would have to be, like a cheerleader and things of the sort, but I really forced myself into that. So 2009 was a hard year. It was a down year. I thought I was going to go bankrupt. Challenges with my marriage, with my business partners, with my investors, and it was a very hard moment. It was a very hard moment. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, those moments can break you or make you into the stronger leader that you are, and that's probably really helped you scale this company into what's going to become a billion dollar brand. What kind of advice would you give aspiring competitors that want to come into your space, or entrepreneurs coming out of? You went to UCLA, I think, didn't you?
Yeah,
or USC. You went USC, I think.
Yeah, I don't know if competitors, but I would love to share with my thoughts with entrepreneurs. For sure. Look, if I look back on my life, I think one thing that I did that I think was good is that I took a lot of risk early in my life. I actually dropped out of studying economics in Argentina to start a business. That failed. But then I went back to the books and studied and finished at USC. But right in the middle of USC, I started this business. And I took a lot of risk. And I think it's having no kids or wife or not a salary that you can like is competing against not having any. I think it's important to have the courage to do that. I think trying out many things early on in life is important. So you find that's something that you love and it doesn't look like work and you're good at. I think that's important. I think having resilience clearly is if you cannot have resilience, I mean, but you actually also have to learn how to take care of yourself, right? You have to learn, because ultimately this is a long ultra marathon that you cannot sprint it all the way. So you have to learn how to do exercise or either meditate, eat well, sleep, because if you play the long game of the compounding of value of the business and relationships, it really pays out in the end.
Great advice. Rodrigo, it's good to have you on the program. Appreciate you coming on.
Pleasure. Thank you so much.
You've been listening to Rodrigo Teijeiro. This is Dean Tobias with the Reboot Chronicles. I want to invite you to subscribe or listen wherever you get your podcast or at rebootchronicles.com. Take care.